Hello there, very good evening. Welcome to another edition of NEWSLINE, coming to you live and direct as always from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. People across the country are really worried about the state of the economy in Sri Lanka. Of course, it's been hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, but we've been discussing an economic crisis here in Sri Lanka from a long time before that. COVID-19 seems to have accelerated the process. To really assess the current situation in the country and not just stop at assessing the situation, but also to provide solutions or to suggest solutions, a way out of this fix that we're in right now. We've got on our show today Mr. Lalinda Sugadadasa. He is an economist, also the head of research and business at ICRA. A very good evening, Lalinda, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Lalinda, let's start off at one point in this whole discussion about the economy, because this is a broad discussion. We can have it for hours and hours, but we've only got 30 minutes. So let's try to get the most that we can in that time. Lalinda, one of the main issues that we're facing right now is the depletion in our foreign reserves. They've come down drastically. And yesterday, Fitch released a report on the foreign reserves of APAC, countries in the Asia Pacific. And in that report, according to that report, many countries in the Asia Pacific have had their foreign reserves actually rise, despite the COVID-19 pandemic hitting them equally as hard as it has hit Sri Lanka. Only two countries have had massive drops in their foreign reserves, and that is Sri Lanka and Laos. What are the reasons for this?
There could be many reasons. One reason could be that our exports are not well diversified. For example, we depend heavily on a few commodities, plus the tourism receipts. Now if you take tourism receipts, per annum we earn about $2 billion US dollars from that. And from some of the primary commodities like tea, rubber, so we earn about just over $1 billion US dollars. Then we have the garments industry, which is the main income earner in the merchandise export sector. So through garments imports, we earn just over $4 billion per annum. And as you all aware, due to the pandemic, we have completely lost the income received from the tourism, and this could be a main reason why we are seeing that our reserves are depleting.
So the exports in the other countries that have had their foreign reserves actually rise are more diversified than of that in Sri Lanka.
Yes. Now, if you take a country like Thailand, Thailand has a very diverse export sector. They are not only depending on the tourism, although tourism industry is a big industry in Thailand, they also do a lot of other types of export, agricultural export, merchandise, so on and so forth.
Moving forward, Lalinda, now there have been some policy decisions that have been made in Sri Lanka to reduce taxes as this government came into power. But then there are other policy decisions like, let's take for example the ban in imports in Sri Lanka. Now this is also another topic of concern for many Sri Lankans, not only consumers but importers and exporters as well, because it impacts importers obviously because they can't import the things that they need. It impacts exporters because exporters need foreign items, raw material from overseas to bring into Sri Lanka, add value to it and then export. Those businesses are hit, and what all of this does is really create an imbalance within the market here in Sri Lanka. It also cuts down on our access to foreign markets because when Sri Lanka doesn't supply enough, they'll just get it from somewhere else. This import ban that has been in place in Sri Lanka for a little over a year right now, how long can this continue?
Okay, so the import ban has now from the exporters' point of view, initially the bans were quite draconian. Like, you had credit limitations, and certain products were temporarily suspended from importing. And later on, what the government realized is because of these import restrictions, the exporters are getting affected. So they little by little they fine-tuned and they have given some relief to the exporters.
Because at the beginning it was a blanket ban over all imports, but then
most of the
it got better.
Yeah. Then right now it has come to a point where the exporters are quite okay. I'm not saying that the 100% it's as before, but it has improved a little bit. That's why you see every month we are managed to export about 1 billion per month, and that is a good outcome
depending on the situation.
Depending on the situation. Now, but the biggest impact is on the consumers, because the people who are importing these items to sell to the final consumers, the retail segment is getting affected, and that's what you are seeing. Like certain commodities, the prices of certain commodities are going up, and that is directly impacting the final consumers. So that means the inflation is being affected, is going up because of these trends.
Lalinder, also besides the impact that this has had, of course, on our consumers, on the image of Sri Lanka, we saw words of caution coming from the European Union, from the United States, from the World Trade Organization regarding this ban that some have identified or termed as draconian or ad hoc. The World Trade Organization promotes free trade among all countries. So closing our doors to exports from other countries being imported to Sri Lanka doesn't quite sit well with these organizations. What kind of impact are we looking at as a country from these international organizations, because they are vital, of course, for our survival, our economic survival as a nation in this global village?
Yes, I think it's a very important point what you're bringing here, because the trade has to be two ways, right? I mean,
it's not a one-way street.
Yeah, exactly. So you buy something from me, and I will buy you something from you. So when we implement import controls, what happens is our trading partners can also implement retaliatory measures. They can also say, okay, you are not buying anything from me, so I don't have to buy anything from you. I'll look for some other source. So they will. So there are some, geopolitical implications of this. So because of these reasons, import controls cannot be a permanent solution or permanent measure in the policy arsenal of the government. So they have to think about an exit strategy also, because right now exporters might not get affected in the short run, but as the time goes on, what happens is little by little the cost of living will go up, and it has to be reflected in the wages. So exporters in the medium term, they might see some pressure for the wages to go up. So ultimately it comes down to the export sector as well. So all these sectors are connected, and because of that reason, we need to think about an exit strategy, and also maintain good trade relations with our biggest trading partners.
Lalinder, maintaining trade relations with our partners, of course, is not just a matter for trading or exchange of goods and money. There are other demands that come with it. One proper depiction of this is the European Union's concerns about the human rights situation in Sri Lanka and what really is happening in Sri Lanka. The image of Sri Lanka on a global scale as a member of the international community. This discussion I'm bringing now to the GSP Plus concession here in Sri Lanka. The European Union passed a resolution needing for a review of Sri Lanka's eligibility for the GSP Plus concession. Now, on these concerns, how really important it is, and what are the real external factors that are affecting Sri Lanka's image in these trade relations with other countries, especially the EU and the GSP Plus?
Now last year, under GSP plus scheme, we have exported about 3.6 billion worth of goods to under this scheme, right? So 3.6 is a substantial amount. So that means we need to hold on to GSP plus, because it's very important that for us to stay competitive and to have a good access to these markets.
Lalinda, just a quick description on what really are we entitled to under the GSP plus concession for the benefit of our viewers.
I cannot tell you that offhand, I'm sorry, like...
right. But these are tax concessions.
Yeah, tax concessions. So what happens is, like, you have a preferential rate, tax rate. Some of the items are tax-free. Some items have a lower tax rate. So that's why I said, I don't remember the exact tax figures.
Right.
But this is very important for us to, like, have a level playing field with some of the countries who are not eligible for GSP plus. So if we, like, based, if the competition is based on the price, we have an advantage because of the taxes. Our prices will be at lower, almost in par, or maybe a little below what some of our competitors are offering. So because of that, I think it's very important that we maintain, we try to hold on to GSP plus without losing it. And to answer your question, some of the demands are in terms of creating the freedom and institutions, independence, then human rights, and so on and so forth. These things are not unreasonable demands, right? So when you, like, when you take some of these the source markets, right, the buyers from this EU region, they care about these things, like
whether their products are being manufactured by using child labor, for example.
Exactly. So they care about these things. So the biggest markets for our exports are EU and USA. So EU, we send about 3 billion, USA 2.5 billion, and the consumers in these source markets, they demand ethically produced goods, and so ultimately it will reflect on the image of the country, right? Sri Lanka being a country which values human freedom.
One of the oldest democracies in Asia.
Exactly. So I think it will bring some good PR to the country.
Lalinda, some of our policymakers think that these demands by the European Union, the World Trade Organization, the United Nations Human Rights Council are an impingement on our sovereignty. They're meddling with the affairs of a sovereign state, that is Sri Lanka. As an economist, would you agree with this? Is there any water to this argument?
If there is any, I don't see. But in my opinion, some of these demands are very reasonable, which is, I don't think it is very difficult for us to, like, achieve these things, like, freedom and all those things. It's not very, it doesn't take a lot of effort for us to implement these things, and it will only add to the country's image as a ethical country
that respects human rights.
Exactly, that respects human rights.
Lalinda, another serious policy decision that has been made in recent times is the outright ban on the import of chemical fertilizer and other agrochemicals. We will continue our discussion after this short commercial break on this issue. How has it impacted Sri Lanka's economy? And we will not stop there. We will go on to discuss with Lalinda about possible solutions that Sri Lanka can look at to get out of this crisis, the lack of foreign reserves in Sri Lanka, and also the general economic crisis that Sri Lanka is facing. Stay tuned. You're watching Newsline live.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsline Live. We're in discussion with Lalinda Sugadadasa, an economist. Lalinda, just before the break, we promised our viewers that we will discuss about these policy decisions on the ban of chemical fertilizer. We had a number of other bans in Sri Lanka, based on the export ban, on the import ban. We had specific decisions to ban the import of palm oil, which was then reversed, and they allowed certain forms of palm oil or for certain industries for palm oil to be imported back into Sri Lanka. But the farmers in Sri Lanka are currently up in arms against this decision to ban chemical fertilizer imports into Sri Lanka. Now, according to the government, the whole reason behind this decision, because everything has to have a reason, the reason behind this decision is to create a more healthier future generation in Sri Lanka. Lalinda, speaking in terms of an economist, such a decision that will affect many generations to come, the view, of course, of the agricultural experts is that this needs to be phased out into a number of years. There have been countries that have tried to do this overnight, but they failed, and 100% is truly a massive amount. As an economist, what kind of an impact would this specific decision, one decision that has been taken by our policymakers, have on the economy of Sri Lanka?
I think some economists have already questioned the thinking behind this whole idea. So the concern that most of the analysts who are looking into this issue is having is whether this can be implemented completely in one go. Now, in terms of the long-term implications, having a healthier nation, all those things have dividends. I agree with that. But these things are long-term. You might not see the benefits right now. The biggest fear that some of the economists are having is like, if the yields crop yields are going to go down because of the adoption of organic fertilizer, that's going to impact the prices of vegetables and the food-related items, and which can be harmful to the consumers. So I think this has to be done with the proper study of what is the implication, what sort of impact this would have in the near term, and analyze the cost benefit, balance it out, and take a prudent decision based on these.
Lalinda, the head of the executive came and said that we spend about $400 million annually on the import of chemical fertilizer. By this move, we can save this $400 million and give it back to our farmers. Is this possible?
Well, you have to look at. Okay, if that is true, like if we give this back to the farmers, we need to also look at whether this move can produce enough food to replace what has been
what was previously produced with chemical fertilizer.
Right. Can we meet that target, right? If that can be achieved, then this can be justified, this decision can be justified. But if we can't achieve that, then we'll have to rethink this decision.
Lalinda, we're in the final few minutes of this show. Let's speak about solutions, starting off with the lack of foreign reserves in Sri Lanka. Where do you see Sri Lanka going, moving forward, try and get us out of this?
Yeah, so lately so many have commented on the foreign reserve situation in the country, and I think it's very important that we get our external sector in order. For us to do anything, we need to first get the pandemic under control. That is number one. So that means we have to get at least 80 to 90% of the population vaccinated as soon as possible. We initially thought 60 to 70% is enough, but now we understand that it is not going to be enough, so we need to get people vaccinated as soon as possible. So once we do that, then we can start get the entire country to work at their full capacity, and also we need to help the businesses who are affected by the pandemic. Right now, what the central bank is doing is to implement moratoriums and try to get credit to the real sector as much as possible. So this effort has to be continued.
Lalinda, there was this idea floated by opposition MPs about going to the IMF for a debt restructuring program. However, the State Minister of Finances, Ajit Niwad Kabral, and the government as a whole are hell-bent against this decision. They're even refusing to consider this as an option.
Right.
In your view?
The main reason why the government might resist going to IMF is because if you go to IMF, they have certain conditions that you have to meet. So these conditions might be, painful for certain sectors, right? For example, they might say you need to increase taxes, or they might say the government sector employment has to be kept at a certain level. You can't recruit more people to the government sector. Likewise, and also they might force the government to sell some of the SOEs. Some of these decisions are politically unfavorable, politically unpopular. So these reasons could be why
what's stopping the government from going. But Lalinda, we've had discussions on NEWSLINE itself and many other programs here, speaking about how the government sector is overcrowded. That every government that comes into power simply use this trump card that they have. I will provide you with employment, and this employment that they're providing is not regulated. There is no skill development. People are just recruited randomly and placed all over the country, and this is really burdening Sri Lanka. We currently have a government employment, state employment at about 1.4, 1.6 million, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and that is a lot for a country of just 21 million people.
Yeah. Yes. If you are providing employment that is not producing something productive for the economy, that's going to be a burden.
It's going to be counterproductive.
It will be counterproductive. So what you're doing is to create more inflation if you just give out jobs. Technically it's possible for people to the government to recruit people. So what happens is when you do that, that's going to be unfair on the people who are really producing,
who contribute to the economy, in a meaningful manner. Lalinda, I'm sorry to rush you through, but we're in the final few minutes of our show, and I'm trying to pose to you as much questions as we can. Lalinda, if not the IMF, what really is the government looking at? What are the possible options?
Yeah. So, like I said, first you need to see what are the you need to look at the current debt situation, and you need to look at options of restructuring some of the bilateral debt that you have. So you need to talk to your counterparty and see whether these can be restructured, maybe rollover, and maybe have some soft conditions on these loans. And secondly, what they can do is they can go for multilateral organizations like IMF, ADB. They can look at project loans. Recently we got some project commitments from South Korea. Likewise, you need to look at reducing, lessening the debt burden as much as possible. And also you can...
and also refrain from investing in huge infrastructure projects that will not have a return on investment in Sri Lanka on the long run?
In the short run, if you can create jobs that are sustainable from your project,
that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. But if you are looking at projects that will take a long time to complete, but you might not see the benefits at the short run, we might have to reconsider, doing these projects.
Lalinda, thank you very much for joining us on our show. We've got many questions that have been sent in by our viewers, but unfortunately, due to the time constraints that we have, I was not able to pose them to Lalinda. I apologize to all our viewers out there, but this one question really caught my eye. I don't think Lalinda would have had too much to comment on this matter, but I will read that question out to the viewers just to get a feel of what kind of questions came in today. If Sri Lankan parliamentarians for the last 70 years have been saying that we are the best country in the world, why are we in the dire state that we are in now? Well, of course, you are free to wonder on the answer to this question, but at least I believe to a few of our viewers, the answer would be obvious. Thank you very much for tuning into Newsline. Until we meet again, take care and God bless.